Are you all seeing? There it is. Perfect. Excellent. So I will call to order the Green Mountain Care Board Data Governance Council meeting. And today is 4/21/2025. We do, in fact, have a quorum. And we have a robust agenda. So let's get this started. The first item on the agenda is the chair's report. Well, the board itself has been the Green Mountain Care Board and healthcare providers and healthcare stakeholders in Vermont have been incredibly busy over the last several months. We are really in the midst of a scenario where there's risks and concerns about our largest health insurers' solvency, as well as the health of many healthcare providers. I'm looking at Lowry from the FQHCs, all across the board of our providers who are facing some challenging times. So we at the board have been very concerned about that. I know the legislature, the governor, others are all very concerned as well. So there's several bills that are coming forward in the legislature regarding healthcare and healthcare reform and issues related to potential emergencies with healthcare entities. And the legislative session is nearing its end. We're hoping it will be done mid-May. But we at the Green Mountain Care Board have been actively involved in many of those bills and are working with our other partners in the state as well as stakeholders to see that protections are put in place so we can move forward. The other updates are the Green Mountain Care Board. One of our members, Robin Lunge, recently moved on. She's actually working at Senator Welch's office as their lead on healthcare and immigration. So she certainly has her hands full. We are awaiting the appointment of a new board member imminently. We do not do that work on our own. The process is set up in statute, so it's very similar. It is the same process as actually a judiciary nomination. So there's a nominating committee who interviews potential candidates, and then those candidates are sent on to the governor, and then the governor selects a board member, and then that or appoints a board member, and then that board member is confirmed by the Senate. So stay tuned on that. We currently have 4 members and expect to have a 5th very soon. Staffing on the data team has changed a bit too. We unfortunately had to say goodbye to Stephen Andrews, his wife, actually, as the director of data and analytics. His wife actually got a job in Europe, so they moved to Europe, and we were sad to see him go. He was a real leader in our organization and built a great team and left us in great hands with really robust folks on the data team. Lindsay Kill is the deputy director, and she's stepping up to help cover from Stephen's departure until we have a new director. So I think I'll stop there. Lindsay, did you have anything else to add in terms of any updates on the data team directly?
Nope. We have updates like planned in the slides
Perfect.
later in the meeting, but nothing to add at this time.
Great. Thank you so much. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the December meeting minutes. So folks, if you've had a chance to look at those minutes, I can take a motion if you're ready.
Would you like me to share the minutes? Is that part of the, okay,
Folks should have received them.
okay,
It's fine. I don't think you have to, Lindsay. Thank you.
okay, great.
So do I have a motion to approve the December meeting minutes? Or I can say I move to approve the December meeting minutes. Do I have a second?
This is Josiah. I'll second.
Thank you, Josiah. All those in favor of approving December meeting minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the DUA application from Princeton University. I believe we start with you, Ravi, who and folks from Princeton are on the line, which is great. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So I'll turn it over to Ravi to tee up this next agenda item.
Thank you, Susan. So it was actually an extensive review process. Like we had extensive engagement with Princeton on their application. We had to reach out to internal folks, like on the risk management team, just to make sure that all the clauses of the DUA would be fulfilled and so on. But coming to the DUA application itself, like it is about a study to analyze the correlation, if there is any, between the microtransit available in cities, like to healthcare utilization. So the application was submitted. We have gone through the review internally, and then today I think Andrew from Princeton is here to support his application. So Andrew, would you like to provide information about your research to the DGC?
Wonderful. Thank you for the introduction. And let me know if you can't hear me. I'm not used to Teams. We're a Zoom school, so I apologize in advance. I'm joined today by two of our three remaining team members. Jakob Castle's on the line. He's a professor at Princeton who's an expert in transportation economics. And Liz Powell is also on the line. She's assisting us with our contracts for this project. Janet Curry is also on the project. She is missing today. She's at a conference, but she's a healthcare economist and is super knowledgeable about these things. So as was mentioned, let me just get into a quick 1 to 2 minute elevator pitch of the project, and then I'll open up the floor to your questions for us. So just to recap, high quality public transit has many different benefits, especially for those without personal vehicles. However, for US states without existing infrastructure, it's very difficult to build from scratch. Something we saw in the news is starting with Montpelier in 2021 and other Vermont cities in 2024, Vermont has introduced microtransit. Think of this as an on-demand ride-hailing system with a much lower startup cost than other public transit. So as Ravi said, we're looking to analyze the impact of Vermont's adoption of this microtransit on its citizens' welfare, particularly focusing on health outcomes. And that's where the VH Cures data come into play. As an example, microtransit could allow those with chronic conditions who don't have a personal vehicle to obtain the care that they need more easily. The findings of this research in general would inform public policy, and more importantly, would quantify the impact of public transit on people's well-being in the US, particularly for Vermont citizens. 1 more minute here. The specific research questions we have in mind are: 1, how has the rollout of microtransit affected health outcomes, such as the frequency of care? 2, which people have benefited most from microtransit in terms of health? We would suspect it's lower income people who don't have personal vehicles, but that's for the research to decide. And 3, how do healthcare and the demand for microtransit interact? Kind of a classic economics question that we're interested in studying in this context. Just to get into some details on the methods, we, through Jakob, fortunately, are lucky enough to have a partnership with VIA, which is the organization responsible for rolling out microtransit in Vermont. They're great. And so the goal with the data is to aggregate both the VH Cures all-payer claims data set and the VIA data on rides to what we're calling cells. Think of this as a combination of dates of ride or date of care probably the weekly level, demographics of the people seeking care or getting a ride, and geography, locations. To be clear, we do plan to link these data sets. However, we do not plan to link them at the individual level. We're going to link them at the cell level. For instance, merging people with certain demographic characteristics who sought healthcare in a certain week with those groups of people who sought rides. With the connected data in hand, we're planning to do something called an event study in economics, which is basically a statistical test comparing health outcomes before and after microtransit was rolled out in cities where it was and wasn't rolled out. Depending on how this test goes, it'll inform our future research agenda. In particular, how we think the interaction between healthcare demand and microtransit demand interact. That was a lot, so I will pause for questions and other input from Jakob and Liz.
I have nothing to add. Andrew summarized everything perfectly, so I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
I don't have anything to add either. I can answer questions about Princeton's secure research infrastructure where Andrew's planning to store and analyze the data from BHCures.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Princeton team. I will open it up to the council members, and if I see Lowry's hand is up, and folks, if you have questions, just raise council members, raise your hand and ask either our team or the Princeton team any questions you have. Go ahead, Lowry.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Lowry Scharf with an organization called Bi-State PCA. We represent the federally qualified health centers. And I'm curious how it works to get kind of if it's not linked at the individual level, how you're actually, concluding with confidence that the care was received by the same people that were getting the ride, and if not, then how do you kind of deal with the same population of people who didn't get a ride ending up with expensive care, but you're thinking that they are the same group?
That's precisely, that's a great question. And in a dream world, we'd love to be able to connect these at the individual level. That's something we'll say. But of course, we're not able to do that because the identifiers at the healthcare data and the rides data are different. But the beauty of both of these data sets is while they're not identifying the same individuals, they're very fine. They get at very fine demographic characteristics, very fine geographic information. And so you're correct in that the data set we have in mind is a data set of averages, kind of collapsing everything into these cells. We still think statistically there's something interesting there. And of course, we won't be able to say with certainty who got which care. And this person in our claims data set wasn't the person that got this ride. But over a long panel, which we're hoping to get from both data sets, these averages should be informative. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. I guess I think that's the key, I guess, is the enough time with enough people smoothing out the discrepancies.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
I would add one more detail to what Andrew said, and that is that sort of, there's this timing aspect to it as well. Think about sort of seeing a cell before the microtransit has been rolled out. You see how frequently people go to the doctor, and then after the microtransit has been rolled out, that frequency would change. So sort of at that level of granularity, you can at least say with some statistical confidence that something is going on because of the microtransit. And so now, depending on how much variation there is across these cells, you should be able to tell who is affected more and less.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sorry, Kate.
Hi, yes, thanks. Hi, research team. I'm Kate O'Neill. I work at the Green Mountain Care Board. I'm one of the members of the Data Governance Council. So I have, I think they're clarifying questions and their kind of process also. I'll just put them out there and then just look for a response. It's a variety of things, but in your application, you also mentioned census data. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about if you're able to use that data source, how that would impact what you've talked about here and in response to Lowry's questions. And you mentioned 5 cities in Vermont. I think you mentioned Montpelier. I was just, if you said it in your application and I missed it, I'm sorry, but I'm curious about that. And the other thing is, I guess it is in terms of the time frame. The project in Vermont got started in 2021, but I think just recently expanded. So should this application be approved with approved access to VCures, I think it's limited to a 2-year time frame. Just if you could talk about your kind of your long-term plans for the project and how you might access the resources in order to answer your questions in that time frame.
Wonderful. Kate, I heard 3 questions there. I'll try and tackle them in order. The first is, in our application, we do mention 2 additional data sources, only one of which we plan to do, if anything, some linking. The first that we're not planning to link is we've started a collaboration with VTrans, Vermont's DMV, basically, and they're the ones responsible for the rollout of microtransit. And one question we have, and one we're not going to be able to answer with the VIA data and the VCures data, is, who has cars, who doesn't have cars, and who uses public transit. So we're working with them to try and find some of that stuff out. That's just for our own understanding of the setting that will not have anything to do with the data we're going to use for this project. The other thing you did mention is census data. The use case for census data would be if we look at the demographic information in each city or each block in the census, and if we deem it insufficient in the data that we have from VIA or the data that we have from VCures, it would help us provide additional characteristics at the local level on income, race composition, a whole bunch of other things. It would be to support our statistical inference, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying.
Wonderful. And second question, we did mention there were 5 or 6 other cities in Vermont that saw additional microtransit rollout. I unfortunately am from New Jersey, not from Vermont, so I can't remember the cities off the top of my head, but I can tell you that Mover and I think Bar, I might be incorrect about the second one, but these cities over the past year or 2 have started implementing microtransit. One that I know for sure that I listed in the application was called The Mover. It's in Windsor, and they've started this rollout as recently as 6 months ago, but some as long as 12 months ago. And this information is some we're trying to acquire from our VTrans partnership too. So this is still very much being rolled out and hitting different cities over time, but we're hoping, and I guess this relates to your last question, to have a long enough panel to see both a pre-period and a post-period. Of course, if in one city, for instance, the rollout was completed last month and the data we can only obtain is through 2024, hypothetically, we can say nothing about that city. So we're hoping, because A, Montpelier had a rollout some years ago, and B, several of the other cities had a rollout a while ago, to have enough statistical power after the intervention, if you would, to check how these health outcomes changed after microtransit was implemented.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. That's
Go
okay,
ahead,
Susan?
Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, a comment, it's not really a question, but just to put it out there, I know that as a non-state entity, you would not have access to Medicare data. So I just wonder, I guess it is a question. Do you think of that as a limitation to your study? Would you you know, without being able to study the Medicare population. I guess I was wondering if you have thoughts about that.
I have some opinions, and I'm gonna. I often mix up Medicare and Medicaid, and if Janet were here, she would yell at me. But it's so we are looking in our application to obtain Medicaid data, and these tend to be, if I'm not mistaken, for poorer people in the U.S. who can't obtain employer-sponsored insurance or whatnot, and so that is a more important population for us than Medicaid, for the following reason. If it's those lower income people who are more likely to be on Medicaid and can't afford their own vehicles, they're the population we're very interested in. Less interesting to us is the older folks who might be on Medicare. So I agree with you. It would be much better to have the full set of insurance options, but the push we're trying to make in this application is for the Medicaid side, not the Medicare side.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful, and I appreciate that. And I just have one more question, and it's that if you are approved and you do this study, would you be willing to come back and share the results of your study with us, and include maybe in your study recommendations for Vermont? We always like to know how our data are being used and how they how it benefits Vermonters. You're specifically looking at Vermonters, of course. So, but we would certainly love to, maintain a connection and learn from you.
He'd probably answer for Jakob and Janet and say we'd absolutely love to share the findings of our research with you. I'd have to circle Liz in if the public, there's some regulations on what we can include in the publication and whatnot. But like, of course, we would be happy to hop on a call in a year or two after we finish the preliminary findings and, have something to say about policy, which is the goal of this project, of course. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. I had that same question, so thank you for asking it. Josiah, please.
Hey, I'm Josiah. I'm the state's chief data and AI officer. This is a really interesting study. Can you talk me through how the pharmacy data rolls into it, and how like pharmacy access and why, like, it seems like the medical claims I can understand, but the pharmacy access feels a little bit farther away, and maybe that's because I'm not a medical person, but love to hear what you guys are thinking about that.
Yes, Josiah, you're correct in that the medical claims are probably our first order concern, but I think a similar argument can be made for those seeking to pick up prescriptions, and this is something we'd be interested in seeing in the pharmacy data. However, this is something that Janet is more of an expert on than I am, and I regret not having a better answer for you now. But Jakob, do you have anything to add about this? Because I think they're important, although I would say the medical claims are kind of our main area of interest at this stage.
Yeah, so I would just add that there is research in economics and health economics in particular that shows how pharmacy claims data can map into chronic conditions and things like that. And those are particularly of interest to us. So you can think about sort of that data set helping identifying, a fraction of people that might have chronic conditions, and then doing the type of studies we were describing earlier.
Great questions. Anyone else from the council? Valerie, go ahead.
So, I was looking at our data linkage documentation, and, it talks about linkage isn't necessarily only PII or necessarily, at the patient level. So I wasn't sure where you guys, on GMCB stand on that in terms of this study, which is kind of linking things at the date level or the week level, and then talking about the other attributes like gender, age. So and then thinking about the number of people who could be taking advantage of these ride-hailing services, which I think is going to be a small number at the week, week by week. I feel like it could lead to a situation where you could re-identify, and so, not that that's the goal, but since that's the data linkage policy, is meant to address that situation. Are we in that situation?
Yeah, really good points, Lowry. I'll open it up to Ravi or Lindsay. Lindsay's got her hand up, so go ahead, Lindsay, with your input, please.
Yeah, it's a great point, Lowry. It is something that we asked the Princeton team to speak to ahead of preparing for this meeting, which like explicitly the question that we asked was, is it possible after creating this linkage to re-identify people from the other data set that's being linked to VCures? And the response we got is that because the other data set is also aggregated to this level, there isn't the ability to re-identify individuals. But I also want to let Princeton speak to that.
Lindsay, thank you for that. We communicated with our institutional review board about this question, because if we could identify individuals, we need to apply through them. And they basically received virtually the same copy of the application we sent to you, took a look at it and said, this is, in their words, not human subjects research, so it was outside of their jurisdiction. So according to us, we don't think we'd be able to identify individuals, but moreover, our IRB said that based on the plans we have for the data now, it should be okay. But Laurie, I hear your concern. And it's something I guess we'd have to think about if there's sufficiently low N for every single week or something. There is that concern. But Jakob, you can follow up to this.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that it wouldn't be particularly helpful if we focused on a cell that had very few individuals. So in that sense, I would say that, we just screwed up the level of aggregation in a particular place, and we would need to actually aggregate more, because there wouldn't be that much to learn from, 1 or 2 observations. So I think that can be sort of, that can be tackled in some other way. So it's not in our interest either to get very few people in a cell.
Sure. And I'm not actually clear on, if we have a requirement that to avoid the whole issue that there be a certain level of aggregation. But I see that you're going to be aggregating for the purpose of what you're trying to achieve. But in the steps leading up to that, you'll still have the opportunity to end up with a data set that is fairly low N. So again, I'm not saying that we have an issue. I'm just posing the question more to the staff here. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Larry. And Josiah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think what Larry was just getting to, some sort of controls around minimum cell size, I think are important. The smallest town, I'm looking at the list from a VT Digger article, if anybody else wants to look at the list of towns that are included in this. There are the 6 towns that participate. The smallest one, I think, is around 3,500 people. So like there is going to be relatively low N on these, and re-identification does seem like it would be possible. So maybe if there's any controls that you already have planned around cell size, we usually use like data suppression of like, can't use a cell smaller than 6 or 11, depending on, on the data set, but something like that may be included, would resolve this concern for me. So I guess what that would mean, like practically, is like Windsor, look at it on the month basis instead of the week basis, things like that.
Excellent. That works for us.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Am I breaking the world by asking for that to be added?
No,
No,
the data, the boilerplate data use agreement anyway, limits cell size to 11. Yeah.
And I not at all. I think it's really important that we call that out. So thank you, Josiah. Anything else? Any other questions? Ravi?
Oh, I just have a quick question. Andrew, on the manual, there is a publication review section. I just want a double confirmation that, you plan to submit all the publication information 15 days ahead before you publish, right? I know we talked about sharing data, but just wanted to make sure that it is that you are aware of it.
Thank you for the reminder. I believe that's our plan.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi. And I see, so Eric, hold 1 minute. I just want to make sure.
I was just gonna ask.
Yeah. And I'll open it up for public comment and turn it over to you, Eric, after. Just any other questions from the council?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, one last thing.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, this is really interesting, and I really love it. And then I have this thought that as somebody who works with the health centers in this region, who see a lot of Medicaid patients and collect data about those patients, I'm now curious about if we could somehow, participate in this, and if so, on a completely, separate level from this council, does that pose any problem if I, as a council member, were to talk to these guys offline?
I don't think so. And Julia Corlman, I don't know if I introduced Julia at the beginning of the meeting. She's our one of our attorneys at the Green Mountain Care Board and is our dedicated data attorney for the Data Governance Council. So Julia, I don't know if you want to take that offline or if you want to comment on it now.
Yeah, I don't have any comment on it right now, but I can reach out to you maybe and maybe follow up a little bit, kind of, yeah, we'll follow up on it.
Okay.
But I can't think right now of any concern.
Great. I call it a win-win, but we want to follow all the rules. So, okay, any other council members? Okay, I'll turn it over to the HCA. The healthcare advocate for the Princeton folks is our statewide healthcare ombudsman, and they work really closely on many of the regulatory issues that the board works on. So I'll turn it over to Eric Schulteis from the healthcare advocate.
Thank you, Susan. So just real quick, I just wanted to, I don't know, share my own personal observations, I guess. So the American Community Survey at the sub-county level, the MOEs are going to be ginormous. So if you're thinking you're going to get like town level demographic statistics, that doesn't happen in Vermont. Like it's too sparsely populated. And I would even go on to say when it comes to income data, I think for me personally, there's a real concern about, well, it's always concerning, but there's this heightened concern of the ecological fallacy when you're attributing census data or like tract or I guess sub-county you could do it at. There is a lot of income diversity really closely physically located in Vermont in ways that isn't the case, at least for me, growing up in the tri-state or when I lived in California. So for instance, Shelburne, some of the most expensive homes you can imagine, like for Vermont, like $1 million homes, like crazy expensive, right next to dilapidated trailers. And so, and even like around, so I live pretty close to Barrie, like there was monstrous income variability from like large, well-maintained horse farms to double wides that are falling apart. So there is a real risk with the ecological fallacy. I would talk to Department of Health, what they do with that. I know, I mean, Jesse can probably speak to this better than me, but, I would also look at some of the questions in the Vermont Household Healthcare Insurance Survey that's coming out. I don't know if I guess they're not going to do the equity stuff around COVID, but in the past, at least in the last iteration, they had some race and income data, but it's all at the state level, I guess. And they do have microdata available, and that tends to have smaller margins than the ACS data, which is god awful, like estimates that cross zero.
Yes. Again, Janet tends to be the expert with these things, but I think her plan with the census data was not to use the ACS. I believe through her department, there's a different data set which she has access to. Jakob, do you know the details beyond that? Because I understand that some folks at Princeton have better census data than the ACS. I don't know details beyond that. So I agree. Even just in principle, no matter where you look in the US, there's broad heterogeneity in income, and collapsing things at even the county level is terrible because you see these counties with, I guess you would call it a high Gini index, people with the very top of the income level and at the very bottom. So I hear your concern and I agree with you. I can say the half-baked answer I have for you now is the ACS is not the data set we plan to use in our merging. I don't know exactly what is, but this is something I'll ask Janet after this.
Yeah, I would just add that I agree with that concern 100%, and this is something we will deal with one way or another.
Great.
Just
Josiah,
to-
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, just to agree with what Eric said, differential privacy, even in the decennial census, was still pretty problematic in Vermont, and you'll run into that in the smaller towns. So all the census data going to be full of landmines for you.
Jesse, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't want to take us further afield here, but I am happy to, I work with the health department. So as Eric said, we do have some other data sources. And then we've used some other geographies that might be of help here. So I'm happy to talk to you offline.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
you.
And I don't want to rush folks, but I know we have a hard stop at 2:30. We'll get in what we can get in today. If we have to, we can put some other things off to another meeting, but I am aware of the time. It's a wonderful discussion, and thank you, Princeton folks, for answering all of these really incredibly astute questions. Anything else from the council before I look to Kate? She always helps me with the order of operations with votes. Do I do public comment first, or do I call a vote first?
You offered up public comment with Eric there.
Eric, yeah.
You
So I
could see.
can-
Generally, I think you've asked for public comment after a particular application, even though we
Okay.
have it on the agenda like at the end. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't think there's
Yeah,
anything
sure.
more.
So I'll open it up to any public comment from folks not on the council. Great discussion. We have noticed a potential vote for this application. So does anyone have a motion? And I can motion too, if that's easier. I think Kate's gonna motion. She looks like she's. done.
I'll make a motion to approve this application as submitted. And
Can I make a friendly amendment? But did we decide Josiah's comments about cell size were covered by our standard process? Just to
cell
clarify.
site limits are in the data use agreement and would have been probably mentioned in the application, I think, but if
Assuming
we
those are
wanted
in
it to
there?
be different, yeah.
Assuming those are in there, then I'll second the motion as it was originally made.
Great. Any further discussion from council members? Okay, all those in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay. The motion carries. The application has been approved. Thank you again, Princeton folks, and really excited to learn more about your research and looking forward to hearing more as you finish up your project. Thank you again.
Thank you all, and we appreciate the careful questions. We'll probably drop now. Take care.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now we are on to a data linkage request. It's a data linkage request from the Green Mountain Care Board, right, Lindsay? So Lindsay's going to walk us through this. So I'll turn it over to you, Lindsay.
Great. Thank you, Susan. So I'm here today also to present our VCARES and VUDS data linkage request. Admittedly, this was an interesting exercise. Ravi and I and Susan talked at length about, if we are the stewards of these two data sets, then, and we also steward the data linkage process, what does it make sense to do? And we decided it just makes sense to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So we have put together an application for you all to consider. So just reviewing the request details for other people who maybe didn't get a chance to see that on the website. What the GMCB is asking for is we're requesting permission to link the hospital discharge data set, which is known as VUDS, and our APCD's medical claims. So that's from VCARES. And we would like to link them on the person/episode level. So the upsides is that both data resources are claim-based. One is from the provider lens, which is our hospitals, and the other is from the resident lens, which is represented by the payer data. Linking these two would help complete the GMCB's picture of hospital utilization and payments. To address how the data would be stored and kept secure, what we would do if this application were approved is the data would be transferred securely from BOZ NSO, who is our, the data custodians of the VUDS. They collect the hospital data from VUDS. So they would be transferring it securely to OnPoint, and OnPoint, our VCARES data vendor, would be performing the linkage. And this actually mirrors existing processes that we have in place, such as the BIN, the Birth Information Network, and the Blueprint for Health's clinical extract. The resulting linked data would be a de-identified limited use data set, and it would be available to the GMCB in a secure enclave. Our secure enclave is how we access VCARES today, the APCD data today, and so it's only available to authorized users. So it's really two levels of protection. It's authorized user to access the enclave, authorized user to access that particular limited use data set within the enclave. And the linked data, the limited use data set would be used specifically in the annual hospital report, which GMCB is now responsible for producing. And that's it for my high-level overview of the data linkage request.
Thank you. I see Kate O'Neill has a question.
Hello. I see in, well, there are two things. One is I see in the application you've included my name as one of the data use agreement authorized signatories. I think that's a holdover from when I was managing the data use agreement for the Medicare data with CMS. So I will ask a couple of questions, and I know we have a good enough quorum here. I think I'll probably just abstain from voting. So just count me as an abstention. I just think that that makes sense. It feels weird to vote on something that my name is on the application. The other thing is that I think in the application, it says with permission, the file would be shared with VAS NSO once they have a VCures data use agreement. I just want to clarify that in a general sense, a non-state entity does not have access to Medicare data. So if this is contemplated to link data, including Medicare data, it would not be available to VAS NSO. I don't know if you've thought through that at all. But then I guess just a general question around sharing if you could just sort of talk through that part of it, like what once they've submitted the data to OnPoint has created a linked data file that is available in the enclave for authorized users, and then what would VAS NSO's role then be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me try to clarify. So I left that in there because when we initially, sorry, let me back up. VAS NSO currently today does not have a data use agreement for the VCures data. They haven't had need to have that. And so, but this is really interesting territory because we are the stewards of VUDs, but VAS NSO is the custodian. So the data sharing agreement there is, I don't want to speak out of turn, Julia, but I think the data sharing agreement there is born through that agreement, this relationship with them as the data custodians and the executors of that contract on our behalf and us as the stewards. One of the things that VAS NSO, when we approach them about, their interest in linking these two data sources to better understand hospital utilization and payments, they were very interested in this, and their question was really about, and if you've all solved the, I hope I don't say it wrong, the patient identifier issue, across payers and over time, if you've been able to figure out a master person index, it would be really interesting to know how you did that. And so ultimately, the resulting limited use data set, it will be de-identified, and it will have a master, through OnPoint's methodology, will have a master person identifier that is, again, de-identified, for the record, de-identified, but that the two files would be linked. And so what we would be able to theoretically give VAS is, here's a version of your annual file that you provide us through our agreement with the master person index, and they could have that conversation with OnPoint. It may be, and that's not to say that's the only reason they were interested in us doing this. It's been a great partnership with VAS NSO, but that was just one of the things that they brought up, this is really interesting that you all have solved for this. And I said, yeah, it is really interesting. OnPoint's doing a great job. So it may just be that it's really just a conversation with OnPoint about how to track people over time and across payers. But it also, I do acknowledge that we, even with the approvals, they would still, according to all of our current policies, they would need a VCures DUA, and they would need their own, I think, Julia, correct me if I'm wrong, they would also need their own use case for why they would get a copy of the linked data. But I looked back at our other approved data linkage requests, and in all those other scenarios, I think that the people who are bringing together the two data sets, there's almost a co-ownership over both. And so this kind of issue of the other party doesn't get a copy hasn't come up. So that's why I put that in there, was trying to sort of make that mirror. But if that can't happen, because of the way that our current policies are written or more steps are needed, then we could take that sentence out to amend the application for now.
I think that does sound like a different use than the use that's described up under section or question 1. And so I think splitting that out into a separate one makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, we can make that change.
So my question under section 1, like the uses that if we yes this one, the use is a more complete picture of hospital encounters to inform the annual hospital report and the hospital budget review.
Yeah.
Are there any other things that are in view where you would like to use this in the future, or is that really like the only use for this data set?
Yeah, so this is where it gets tricky because the answer is yes, of course, we would love to just be able to use this data linkage for all kinds of things. I can think of like 5 applications off the top of my head. But today, right now, with the policies and procedures we have in place for data linkage, we really needed to limit it to one use. I will say that the annual hospital report is used for lots of things in the state. So with the GMCB taking that over and us using this new linked file, assuming we can, to supplement that report and improve that annual hospital report, then whatever that report is used for, like, it may have sort of subsequent like applications with that report as the vehicle, but right now this is all we can use the linked data for. So if we wanted to use it for something else, we'd have to come back and reapply. Was my understanding.
And I think that makes sense. I guess what I'm wondering is, does it make sense to create a new derivative product that is these two things, and then we approve use cases for that as they come up, something along those lines, which I think is effectively what's going to be happening. It just wasn't obvious from a first reading that that's where this was probably going.
Yeah, I think what you just said makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought of it that way. But what you just said makes a lot of sense.
It's a reasonable way to think about it, and it is similar to what we did with VCares data and the death and birth data files that we received from the health department. So we approved a derivative data file that is available upon request and approval by both entities. Of course, Green Mountain Care Board would have to approve it, as well as the health department would have to approve a researcher use of it. In this case, we're the stewards of both data assets, but still, it's a similar process that you're describing, Josiah. Did I get that right, Jesse? Would you say that was
the only thing
similar?
I would say is the birth one is still in pilot phase, but yes.
Do we need to amend anything in the application then to reflect that, or will the, do you know what I mean? If there are.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question, is like,
Yeah.
there's specific language that I could change, because I just took out the piece about FOS NSO. So I amended that, but if there's more like specific language we could add to address that, what Josiah and Kate just said, I'm happy to do that.
I think the way I would frame it is under question 1, change that first sentence maybe from what it currently says to provide a more complete picture of hospital encounters, or maybe leave that in, but add that this is a new derivative product and it's going to be named this, and then maybe like new paragraph there and say, and we're also going to use it for this thing right now. So they'll both be in the same application, but it's like, create the new product and we're going to use the new product just for this thing.
Okay. Okay, great. I can do that.
Any other questions from the council? Any questions from the HCA, Eric Schuldeis?
Nope. No questions from me.
Any questions from the public? Okay. So I move that, seems really weird approving
Can I-
my own, oh, Josiah, go.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
could we, if you're making the edits in real time, could you throw
sure.
page 7 on the screen? And then I would
Sure.
move to accept it with the edited page 7 after we see that.
Okay, I will put that up.
Because I think that's the only place where there were changes, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me put this up here. Share. So this is a
Great.
new derivative product. I'll call it hospital claims. Oh. We will use it for influencing the annual hospital report.
And then you can lose the last sentence, I think.
Great,
Yes.
great. I'll just use that for my motion.
Susan, can I just
Yes.
jump in before you make a
Yeah,
motion?
please.
I guess it's a clarifying question, perhaps for Julia. I originally said that I was going to abstain because my name is on the data use agreement request form, but yours is also. So should we, I don't
I'll
know.
make the motion.
Uh,
I'll make the motion. That's easy.
Should
Yeah,
we,
but I
can
think
we
that's just
vote?
in
Is
terms
it,
of the vote.
yeah.
My
Oh,
name is
yeah.
on it or Julia's name?
So
The
sorry,
authorized
Julia.
user signatory, because of our,
'Cause
for
is it me?
VCures, because of our data use agreement with.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so both our names are on there as the authorized users for the data use agreement with CMS for the, yeah.
And can I ask a question, Kate, about that?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that, are you saying that, is it accurate that your names are on there, or your names shouldn't have been put on there? for
No,
the
it
original
is
application?
actually accurate that our names are on there. We are both signatories on our quote unquote data use agreement, which is a little odd, but we need, it's our agreement with CMS for access to Medicare data. And
Mhm.
so when we reapply every year, we're the signatories, and that's why it's kind of listed as us having a data use agreement with our names on there.
Mhm.
So I guess my question really is, initially I thought, well, I just won't vote, but the same case is for Susan, because we're
Yeah.
both data governance council members and our names are on here. If it's okay for us to vote, if you think, then, then I will, but.
Well,
Does
let me,
this-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, does this pose a substantive conflict of interest? This does not appear to me to be a substantive conflict of interest, and I don't see a need to abstain. But Julia, that's much more your opinion than mine.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's exactly the discussion I was going to go down. And so I pulled it up a little bit from our discussion earlier. And so I can say definitely the rules that I just pulled up, basically the question I think for us would be, is there any sort of potential benefit or loss based on the outcome of this vote here? So if you voted yes or no, would it have a potential outcome or loss to you guys as the signatories of the DUA with CMS? I don't know the answer to that because I'm not as familiar with the intricacies, but may that be a question for you to discuss.
I don't see, I mean, for me personally, and Kate, you can chime in here, I don't think there's any kind of a conflict, I
I-
see.
I
I feel
don't
like-
think so either. So,
But it's, I'm
Mhm.
glad we brought that up.
okay.
And I'm hopeful.
I
Yeah.
don't want to be too careful, but I did want to
Mhm.
ask.
There isn't any, in my view, any potential gain here, you know, or I don't see a conflict, but I'm glad, like, let's pause for a moment. And if anyone else has any other thoughts, especially you, Julia.
Yeah, I also agree. Like I said, I don't know quite the intricacies, but I can't envision any sort of benefit that you either of you personally would gain from
Yeah.
just because your
Okay.
name's on the application with the outcome of this vote.
That's fair.
Part of our daily
Right.
job, right, Kate? No, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so I'm gonna
So in that
motion.
case,
Yeah,
I'll
go
motion
ahead.
that-
Josiah. Yes,
I'll motion
perfect.
that we approve this data linkage project as amended.
Perfect. I'll second it. Any other further discussion from the council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? Okay. So that request has also passed.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and let's see, I'm looking at the agenda. The new DUA application forms, and we've got about a half hour left. But and I think that, Lindsay, is that, I'm just looking at the agenda. Is there anything, I think we can get through this and maybe the updates to close it out.
Yeah, I think Ravi is gonna
Oh,
talk
sorry.
about the new, no, that's okay. I was actually just looking to Ravi to make sure that that was true, because I could talk to them, but Ravi looks ready. So I'm gonna let Ravi, if you need to share anything on your screen, or if you just want to talk about the DUA application form change.
Yeah, thank you, Susan and Lindsay. This is actually a minor item. So at our last meeting, we talked about data linkage request, and at that time, when UVM submitted their application, their end date was beyond the end date of the DOA, which was not allowed. So at that time, the council members mentioned to clarify that, the end date cannot be beyond the end date of the DOA. So with the help of Julia, we have now changed, added a note to the specific applications. This is not about the overall DUA application process. It's about the forms that we talked about, data linkage request, and then B, data redistribution request. So I'll share my screen to show where the changes are made. They're very minor changes. We try to keep the overall form as is, at the same time clarifying that they cannot go beyond the end date, right? So please let me know when you see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So sorry to make you dizzy. So it's in one of the, so right here. So previously this phrase was not part of the application. So data linkage request end date, was open. Whereas now it adds, note end date cannot exceed DUA end date, just to clarify. Right. So likewise, on the other application, which is the data redisclosure request, so we did the same thing, we added a small phrase stating that the end date cannot exceed the DUA end date. Right, and then we haven't yet used these forms, we just wanted to first bring it to Data Governance Council to get the feedback or approval before we start using going forward.
That looks great to me. Thank you.
Thank you for taking this up. Yes.
Those are the only changes, just those notes.
That is correct, Josiah. Yes.
Okay. In that case, can I move that we accept this?
Sure. Go for it.
So I move that we
Second.
accept this.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the council? Just thank you, Ravi, Julia, Lindsay, team, and responding to that. Okay, and all those in favor of, oh, I didn't do public comment, HCA or public comment? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, so that has also passed. Thank you again, team, for addressing that issue. Now we will turn it back to Lindsay. And
For
she's going to
very
provide
quick
some
update.
updates. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Hopefully this goes super quickly. But I'm available for any questions. So I'm taking off the applicant hat now and putting on the interim director hat to present to you all some important updates taking place with data and analytics at the GMCB. So I wanted to, so we're going to go over the non-claims payment push that we're doing, the claims and clinical data integration that's listed in a current piece of legislation, S126, and talk about the VUD's work transition from VDH to GMCB, which you heard me allude to earlier with our application. So we began work on this APCD enhancement with OnPoint in August when our new contract began with OnPoint. So we in the APCD today, right now, BCures has ACO capitation for Medicaid, the all-inclusive population-based payments for Medicare, and some payments, not all, for commercial. And for example, BCures has about 50% of the Medicaid spend when compared to the CMS 64. So we have 100% of the Medicaid beneficiaries, but we're just not capturing everything that's paid for them because so much of our state Medicaid program is being paid for not on a claim. And so that's what we mean by this non-claims payment infrastructure. So being able to add this, including non-claims payments as available by the different submitters, will really enhance the APCD and what we're able to do with health system analytics. This work began in February of 2025, and that started, OnPoint's really been championing this, leading this work. It started with interviews with the submitters. Right now, where we are is that OnPoint is organizing submitter feedback to build this potential, like basically give a menu of like the potential data structure options. We will be turning those into recommendations for updates that would be made to the data submission guide for 2026. And then we would share potential changes and open the public comment period. The final changes for this, like the last round of data submission guide changes, that would be voted on by the Data Governance Council. And then those changes would be rolled out to submitters, including like the trainings and all of that OnPoint would lead, and that would be ahead of the annual registration in 2026. So that's the non-claims payment project timeline. Should I keep going or should I pause for questions? Okay, great, I'll keep going. Thank you. So the next topic is the claims and clinical data integration. There's currently legislation proposed in S126, Section 1018, BSA 9353. And that proposed language would allow or permit the Agency of Human Services and the Health Information Exchange Steering Committee to collaboratively develop an integrated claims and clinical data system. GMCB and AHS have begun working together to outline possibilities for meeting this statute should it pass as written. We're also it's been a very collaborative process to contribute to the language in the statute. So like conversations are ongoing between all these different groups. And a couple things we wanted to point out for the Data Governance Council is that the GMCB stewardship of VCures will not change, only the data sharing piece would change if S126 were to pass. And then the DGC would obviously have a role, so stay tuned. And then the last but not least topic, this is very exciting. So GMCB has historically been the stewards of the hospital discharge data, the BUDS, but VAS NSO has handled the data collection and VDH handled the data analysis. Starting 5/1/25, GMCB will be taking over the parts of that work that formerly were taking place at VDH. So we've been working on this transition plan. So we just wanted to give you an update with where we are with that transition plan. We have welcomed a new VUDS analyst. That's Sambadi Majumdar. We're very excited to have him on our team, and he's already begun working on this. We are reviewing analytic files and the deliverables required with the VUDS work, and we're making plans to be able to fulfill that. And then alongside of all of that, we're trying to modernize the data infrastructure and for improved storage and improved analytics. And part of this is the BUDS and VCures integration, which you all approved. So thank you. And we're hoping to just be able to expand and improve the existing annual hospital report with that. So those are all the updates from the GMCB data and analytics team. Any questions?
Thank you, Lindsay.
Mm-hmm.
And welcome somebody. We are really delighted to have him on the Green Mountain Care Board team.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, also, maybe I'll add to, we're working, I think the HCA, I think you mentioned this, Lindsay, with S126 HCA, AHS, Green Mountain Care Board, we're all working very closely together. So stay tuned on that, and thank you for that update. And it's still in flux. So we'll probably have more closure from the legislature in the next couple of weeks.
Go ahead, Josiah.
You sure?
Yeah.
Josiah, go ahead, and then Kate, you can go next.
Yeah, I just was wondering if there's any particular like implications or opinion that like how that changes things really. Like I know it looks like more work, but like yeah, if there's anything that we should be aware of as the council on it, other than we may have a role.
Oh, you're talking about S126?
Yeah.
And it's section 10 explicitly. Yeah. You know, it depends on where we end up, Josiah. I think the wording that is in front of us now is really consensus and is much more comfortable, I know, for the Green Mountain Care Board, and making sure from my perspective that with any data linkage process that the Data Governance Council is involved and that we are following our statute. I mean, those are the two big ones. So to answer your question there, it probably won't be any different than what we would have done without the statute. But I think there's a desire to keep this moving, to keep the linkage moving. And I think that's the impetus behind the statute, behind the bill. Kate, did you have something?
Yes, just two brief things. One on H126. I know that as with all bills, language changes all the time, and so I don't know where it is currently, but there were two questions that I had related to language when I last read it. One was, and Josiah, I don't know if you've looked at it recently, but one thing that alerted me was something related to privacy restrictions, and how the language talked about appropriate or best practice privacy restrictions, and giving that authority to the Agency of Human Services, where I thought, isn't there an ADS role in that? And so I'm not as in the details with the bill, so that was just something that I noticed. And the other question that I had was, and Lindsay, you kind of mentioned it in your slide, but I would just want to be crystal clear that we understood as a data governance council what happens to, or that we preserve the integrity of VCURES, the all payer claims database, because the language, is maybe getting looked at now, but I just want to make sure that there's, if it's an AHS managed database, is this how does it all kind of come together or work together, or, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. The language is changing in real time. Like, I think there's yet another version that's coming out before I'm presenting on Wednesday. So I think there's another version in the works. The latest change that I've seen that everybody's like in agreement on is that it I think different from what's currently posted on the website is that this would be more, we're going the direction of more permissive versus mandatory integration. So there's the opportunity to potentially link claims and clinical data if voted on by a certain majority, and we're defining that majority by the HIE steering committee. And the HIE steering committee is made of a lot more stakeholders than just AHS. And the GMCB now has a voting seat on the HIE steering committee as well. So there's lots of like parts and pieces that we're all trying to bring together so that this is like really, we're being collaborative and we're all moving in lockstep together. Because I think in general there is like real interest in this, but like as Susan sort of laid out, that there's lots of reasons to also be cautious right now with linking the data. So trying to do both.
Thank you. And I had another something to add related to the update on the VUDS stewardship and data collection. Just to say for all of the Data Governance Council members and others, the way I think of it is that it is more aligned with our current practice with VCURES. And so in statute, we're named as, the Green Mountain Care Board is named as the steward of the all payer claims database, or VCURES, and we hire a vendor, and the vendor collects the data from the payers, and they do their value adds and the quality checks and all of those things. And then they provide the data to the Green Mountain Care Board, via the Enclave, and they're authorized users, and there are a variety of state agencies as well as non-state entities that have data use agreements to access the data. In the case of VUDS, there was always a triangulation. So we have the contract with VAS NSO. So we're the stewards of VUDS, and we have the contract with VAS NSO. They collect the data from the hospitals, they do the quality checks and all of those things. But instead of sending the data to the Green Mountain Care Board directly, they sent it to the health department, and then the health department, on our request, if we had an authorized user, would distribute the data to those authorized users with a data use agreement. So this just in a way simplifies that part of the process. But to be clear, the health department still has access to VUDS data just as the Green Mountain Care Board does. Like that part, the use of the data doesn't change. It's just the relationship with VAS NSO think that's right. Did I get that right, Lindsay? Did I say that right?
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Great. So opening it up to public comment or the HCA, if you have anything to add, go ahead, Eric.
Just really quickly, I think we addressed that concern of yours, Case. It's still not going to DGS, but it has some, at least in my opinion, much more protective requirements. So I still don't know if AHS is the absolute right place. I think the much more protective requirement, at least in my opinion, is the best that could be gotten. And then, I think, in the claims and clinical integration is a bit of a misnomer. It's that it looks like the consensus now is that this committee of 14 members, of which the Green Mountain Care Board is voting, a majority of that committee, so not a majority of the quorum, but an actual, right now it would be 8 votes for integration and control. That committee can place any conditions on the use that it wants, and that's the only thing it can be used for. Say, for instance, we were looking at an integration of claims and clinical data. It might say, well, you can only use that for planning or surveillance, but not for clinical decision making. So I think it, in my opinion, it allows the experiment with the Medicaid claims data, which AHS already has, to go forward and really to offer evidence one way or another that it can be effectively used and that there is an actual use case. And Susan and Lindsay have my email. I am happy to explain to people exactly how how this process is played out. I don't really want to say it. I think you should contact me directly. But I am confident that this is a reasonable compromise and likely the best compromise that all parties could have, given the current circumstances.
Great. Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
I think they have testimony in the legislature Wednesday. I think Lindsay mentioned that. So I believe you're going to be testifying, and perhaps folks from AHS and definitely GMCB. So great. Consensus is always good, and protection is premier. So thank you. Any other public comment? Look at that. 2:25. Lindsay and I were texting saying we're way over, but we worked it out. I knew we'd catch up. And the discussions are so great. I'm just being on this council with all of you is really an honor. And of course our team GMCB is immense. So thank you all. So hearing no public comment, is there any new business from the council? Nope. And then I don't see a date. Do we have a date for our next meeting? And if it's okay if we don't, we can get it out to folks and get their calendar populated. But I don't see the next meeting date. It's usually every other month we meet or so.
Yeah.
It is on our calendars on June 3rd.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Wonderful.
It's back to the regular schedule, June.
Okay.
Yep. So it's Tuesday,
Great.
June 3rd, 2:00.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those
Second.
in favor? Great. All those in favor? Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Great job.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, folks.